All right. Hello to everybody. Um, Gosh, it has been so long since I've done this. It's been like 3 weeks since I've done this, so I hope I remember how to do it. Um, I just now, as you can see, put the StreamYard link in there for anybody to call in. If you are just now joining us and you're unfamiliar with this channel, you're unfamiliar with me, maybe this is just popping up in your feed. As you can see, the title is it's a live weekly call-in philosophy show. This is something that I have been putting together and enjoying doing it. But I host it once a week. I've been gone for a couple of weeks. We traveled out of the country. I had a bad ear infection, and then we kind of wound down the summer. There's been a lot of stuff that's happened. We wound down the summer, and my semester started because I teach at the university, of course. Then my son was still in his summer break, so we had to like it's hard to get anything done when you have a kid around. So like once he was back at school, like now I can actually focus on some things and get some work done at home. But anyway, yeah, so it's been a while. My trip to the Baltics was amazing. I'm not here, of course, to talk about that. We're here to talk about philosophy, but the Baltics was amazing. We went to all three Baltic countries: Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and then we also hopped over to Finland, Helsinki, Finland, for a day trip, and that was really wonderful. Not a lot of people get to those countries in Europe, if they get to Europe at all. Especially I didn't see very many Americans there, so it's really nice. It's one of like the last countries, or set of countries, I guess, that you don't see a bunch of influencers out with their selfie sticks and stuff, and doing TikToks and stuff. So you see that in other European countries, but it's nice to see that. So yeah, so just as a reminder, for anybody joining us, this is how the show goes. So you call in, anybody can call in. The link to do so is right there in the chat. So if you look at the top pinned message, it looks black. You see it right there. And it's the very first chat message. Also, I think I happened to put in there twice, but in any case, you click on that. You don't need to sign in. That may change, but I'd have to change some settings. But at the present, you don't need to do any sign in or logging in or any registering with StreamYard. You just click the link. It goes right to my studio. Ask that you have your camera on, of course, so we can all see your pretty face. And so also because I don't like being anonymous online because I think that encourages some bad behavior. But I encourage people to also do that. It's some transparency. You know what I mean? Yeah, it just helps. Some people though, like it looks like we have a guest here, Objective Ethics. In his case, he's got an exception. He's got accommodations, like just like in the classroom accommodations. We've already talked a couple of times, so I'll bring him on here in a sec. But yeah, as you can see, let me share my screen real quick, and I'll show you what I'm talking about right here. So I scroll down right here, right under where I am in the video, click open the link to the description, and boom, this tells you all the stuff that we've talked about before, all our past episodes, past guests, past topics, and then a note on, maybe you're coming here thinking I'm going to debate. I don't debate. So there's a bit of that information is there as well. I encourage you to go look at that if you've never been on the show here before. And yeah, so we will bring on our first guest, official Gnosis. Nathan says, if I'm really ugly, can I stay off camera? Uh, Man, I don't think you're ugly. First of all, look at your face. A beautiful face right there. But yeah, it's a funny question. Yeah. No, man, unless you've got accommodations, unless you've registered with the university and you've got special accommodations from your doctor, you've got to have your camera on. So in our case, I'll bring on Objective Ethics here, who does have special accommodations. And we've talked before, but I can't hear you yet. Maybe it's because you aren't talking yet. But welcome
Yeah, no,
back to the call-in show. And how's it going, man?
brother, I appreciate you. Can you hear me okay?
Hold on, I can't hear you. Are you sure that your
Yeah, is my mic not
mic
working?
is working? I think I've unmuted you.
Oh,
Da-da-da-da.
there we go. Is that working now? Can you not hear me?
Okay,
Yeah, I can see it moving
you can
there.
hear him. Okay, something's wrong with settings real quick. So let me change that real quick. This should be coming out of my earpods here.
Test.
Right here.
1, 2,
okay,
3.
keep talking, and
Okay.
it does sound like it's an issue with my audio, unfortunately.
All right. Well, I don't know if the audience is listening and bored, so I'll just see. What can I say here? 5 ants moved into an apartment with 5 other ants. Another 10 ants. No, now you're gone. This always happens when somebody comes back from vacation. You got to reacclimate, right? You are actually on mute. I don't know if you can hear me or not, but your microphone looks like it's muted. So it sounds like the audience is hearing me. Hey, brother, are you able to hear Dr. McAllister?
That's really funny, by the way.
There you go.
I wonder if it's a thing with StreamYard. Do you mind? I'll kick you out, and then we'll see if you coming back in might. Well, actually, let me see. I can edit his mic settings. Okay, he'll try to come back in here in a second. Sorry about that, guys. It seems like it's something out of my control, but if it is in my control, I'm going to try to fix it, of course. So he'll call back in a sec. And okay, so you guys can hear me now, though, right? I must have muted myself. Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, I did that. I did that. I wonder if because I can hear other audio tabs just fine. So if the tab is unmuted, okay, you can hear me now. You could always hear objective. Okay, well, maybe he'll call in later. I don't see him back. But yeah, sorry about that, guys. That's unusual. But okay, so he's back. Let's bring him back on and see if I can hear him now.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Dang, no, still. Oh man. Mic settings. This has never happened to me before, and I wonder if it's just a feature of StreamYard, which is not a good thing. Because my AirPods are just fine. I can hear other tabs.
I know the audience can hear me, or they could before anyway. And I know I can hear you just fine.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like my tab is muted. Okay. You know, it's funny because Nathan's saying you guys can hear both. It'd be funny if you just ask your questions and I answer as if I hear what you're saying, but that of course would not generate very good understanding on both sides. So
no, that would be dysfunctional because I want to release. I want to ask.
The problem is if I stop this stream, I'd have to redo the stream all over. So I'm looking my best.
Why don't I jump out and let somebody else jump in, and then see if their connection,
the StreamYard tab.
See if their connection is better. I don't know if somebody else wants to jump in. I'll jump out and leave a comment saying that
now, and now I've unmuted it. So I know how to do that, and I've done that. And the tab right now in Chrome is not muted. Yeah. Okay.
Let's out and see if your connection is.
You try.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Nathan, can you hear me, brother?
Bizarre.
Yeah, I can hear you objective. So.
Well, I can let you guys talk and just sit here and just try to fix it. How about you guys have a conversation and then I just try to fix it until I can hear something. So go ahead.
Sounds good. I can try.
You take all my questions for me, Nathan. You can stand as my proxy for a bit. I'll just mute myself.
Shall I pretend to be a Catholic and give my answers from that point of view? Maybe that'll be
That'd
fun.
be lovely. No, I don't know. Now, Nathan, I've actually seen one of your videos before. I do recognize you, and I can't, honestly, it's only been one video, and I cannot remember the conversation that you had, but you struck me as a very intelligent young man, very highly educated in philosophy in particular. So I appreciate you coming on here because I am an agnostic, but I actually do believe in objective morality from a naturalistic explanation, which is what I was going to run by Dr. McAllister. I've just recently come up with a theory for all this, and I know already that my premises need to be reworked. So I wanted to run it by a professional and have him really challenge me and maybe advise me. Do you mind if I run it by you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm interested to see what I'll like come up with from my fake Catholic perspective as to what's wrong with your argument. So we'll see.
Yeah. However, if you want to just, however you want to approach it, I appreciate it. So it's got 3 premises. And again, I any constructive criticism, I know this needs to be reworked. So just, be as brutally honest as you want to be. So premises number 1 is that anything that comports to reality is an objective truth. Premise number 2, morality requires action and is the active pursuit of well-being. Premise number 3, well-being is the greatest possible reduction of harm in any given imposition of free will. And the conclusion is that well-being is tied to morality and does comport to the reality of maximal reduction of harm. Therefore, objective morality is true.
Okay. There's a few things that I can think about off the bat. So the ones that would apply to sort of like both camps in terms of what my personal views would be and what a Catholic philosopher or whatever would say is that it's not immediately clear that it's a valid argument, right? Now, I think you could charitably interpret it to get it to a state where it was a valid argument, and that might be exactly what you've got in mind. But it's not immediately clear to me. So let me just think about what you've said. So anything that comports to reality is an objective truth. Morality requires action, the active pursuit of well-being. So that would be to say it's a necessary condition, right?
Correct.
Well-being is the reduction of harm. So that would be an identity claim. Like, is that logically how you'd evaluate that? Just as like a biconditional or something?
Yes.
And then the fourth premise. Sorry, what was that again? Was that
That
it
was
was something? Yeah.
that was the conclusion.
Oh, from the combination of those.
Yep.
I thought there was a fourth premise that was something like well-being does comport to reality or something like that. I remember you
Yeah,
saying.
its well-being is tied to morality and does comport to the reality of maximal reduction of harm. Therefore, objective morality is true.
Well-being
So
is tied to reality.
It's an attempt to tie all the premises together, essentially. So tying morality to well-being and tying well-being to reality. And since reality, if it's true, if premise number 1 is true, then morality would be an objective standard.
Yeah, I think that is definitely where I'm having trouble connecting it to the rest of what's being said there. So I mean, the claim that there's a few kind of, I don't know, like what I would say this to myself, so I'm not saying this as like an insult or anything, but there's a few kind of like, oh well, okay, the technical neutral, I say Weasley, but the technical neutral way of putting it would be like ambiguous or amphibly, it's sometimes called, right? And that's these words tied to reality and comport as well. So it's kind of underspecified what those mean. Like things can be tied to reality. Presumably, for example, if God exists or souls or demons or everything's reductive physicalism, you could kind of name anything and say it's sort of tied to reality. It's not clear what the criteria are for something to be tied to reality or not tied to reality because it's a very ambiguous term. And it's a similar sort of issue for comporting that's also in that premise. So it's then hard for me to understand how that premise should be interpreted. Yeah, feel free to come back on that.
Yeah, no, I perfectly understand what you're saying. And what I was attempting to do, probably not very successfully, was explain in the premises that what we're really getting at when we're talking about morality and well-being is the maximal reduction of harm and also about the imposition of free will. Because without free will, I don't think that morality is even a valid discussion to have.
So I think that what you're saying there, it's a valid question to raise and a valid discussion to have, right? I guess what my concern would be about trying to put this together in a deductive argument that entails that claim is that particularly with a few premises like that, it has this appearance to me of being very kind of question peggy, in the sense that if what you're going to logically have is a couple of claims, and they're basically going to be identity claims about, well-being is reduction of harm, and that's what morality is, and that's kind of what it amounts to. It's very, very similar to just sort of asserting the conclusion in terms of its epistemic status to someone. If they're already convinced of that conclusion, then they'll probably be convinced of the premises. Likewise, if they reject the conclusion for some reason, they'll probably, they'll definitely reject the conjunction of the premises. And I think that what often good deductive arguments do is they either will highlight contradictory claims that people are committed to, because that's going to then force them to sort of reevaluate their beliefs in some way, or they will kind of work from sort of more, and maybe you think these premises are modest, right? That might just be a product of disagreement, but maybe you'd think that the premises they might appeal to might be less kind of theory laden, if that makes sense, in the sense that these two premises are very close to the theory that they're supposed to establish. And that might be more persuasive to people then, because the premises would be more neutral. So that's what I think of that broadly.
No, I really appreciate that, and I'm taking notes, but I'm also going to come back and watch this video because you're giving me so much to think about that I can't obviously process all this immediately. I'm not nearly as sharp as you and Dr. McAllister are. So you're talking to a village idiot here. I'm just a sailor.
You flatter me too much. No.
I appreciate you breaking it down in ways that I can understand it. So let me just ask you, just in general purposes, and I don't want to just take up Dr. McAllister's stream with all this, because I really wanted to.
No, go ahead.
Mention it. Oh, hey, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
No. So I can hear you guys now. I changed to wired, but these are so funny because they're kind of like those airplane ones, but they're actually from Segovia Castle in Segovia, Spain, and I kept them because they're super cool. They came in handy. But this is actually pretty nice. It reminds me of like when I'm in grad school. You don't get this a lot these days. Like you can like connect with people, but like in grad school, you like walk in on a conversation. You're like, yeah, oh yeah, like oh, but I have this to say. It kind of takes the pressure off because it's like you don't have to answer all the questions. You're just interpolating and jumping in and like adding to the conversation. So I like what's going on here. So if you guys want to, continue, wrap up what you're saying with each other, and I've got some thoughts here too, objective as well. But yeah, you had something you want to say.
Feedback. I do, and I don't want to lose my train of thought because I'm not real good at this. But I don't want to be rude. The first order of business is to welcome you back and ask that you have safe travels and check on your vacation and do things in their proper order here as a gentleman.
Of course, yeah, I did. Thank you. We traveled very safely. I did get another ear infection, believe it or not. So I don't know if you guys knew this, but I got hearing aids not too long ago because my hearing is pretty bad. I'm only 38, I think. Last time I checked, I think that's right. And it's because of all those stupid concerts I went to when I was younger, and I stood like right by the speaker. Bad idea. So I got hearing aids, but because I'm so vain, I got the ones that like you have to shove into your ear canal so you can't see them. That's where the ear infections are coming from. So I'm going to have to like just suck it up and just get the ones you can see. Just have to deal with it. I'd rather have that than, ear infections my whole life, which are really terrible. So yeah, I made it back. It's a beautiful area of the world. I don't know if you guys have been. People don't often travel to like Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania and the Baltics. I mean, maybe Finland we got over there for a day trip, but beautiful area, rich history. Those cities, the capital cities, were only founded in like the 12 or 1300s, and as a product of the Northern Crusade, actually, which was the last crusade. So rich history there. You got a Viking history is there. You got a lot of pagan history. And then recent, more like Soviet history as well. So they're old SSRs. So yeah, there's that. And I also would be remiss, Nathan, if I didn't thank you for jumping in on here, man. Like you just saved the whole stream. And man, what a guy, dude. That's what a nice fake Catholic.
It's fake Catholic apologist. Like
fake Catholic apologist. That's awesome. I didn't see the whole part, of course, but that's great. But anyway, yeah, my trip was really great. But I'll back over to you, Objective.
Okay, so I'm so glad to hear that, and I'm so glad you made it back safely, and I'm glad that the maximally great pizza watched over you and blessed you in your journey.
Yeah.
the the I would say so to Brother Nathan, since he was following the whole thing, ultimately my goal here is to justify this position by looking at evolution, the fact that we're a social animal and that we need our community to survive as a species. And I also do not believe in human exceptionalism. So I'm trying to find a way to tie this to everything that has a conscious. And it's a tall order, and I have not effectively been able to articulate all this. So I don't know if you have any advice on that from coming from that angle, because that's really what I'm trying to. The actual grounding of this whole argument comes from the evolutionary reality that we live in as a social animal and how morality benefits us as a species, which is what I think makes it objective.
Hmm. I think so. I'll outline what I see as the main difficulty or hurdle to overcome. And I mean, it's not something I believe, but then I can maybe gesture at the direction that you could go in that might end up having something to it. So I think the main issue is going to be that what you're trying to get to in your conclusion, right? This claim of there being, objective moral statements or proposition. I mean, again, you'll have to kind of unpack what objectivity means here and what exactly it is that you're kind of arguing for. But my thought is that the main issue is going to be there's some component to that is going to be incredibly kind of metaphysically thick. It's going to be attached to a lot of commitments in philosophy of language and philosophy of mind and metaphysics about what propositions are, what type of existence they have, maybe even commitments about truth, for example. And they're going to kind of be bundled up together in some way. So even if in the premises you're trying to kind of like get to that conclusion via these claims about evolution or sociology or anthropology, whatever it might be, you're going to end up having to somehow get those commitments in your premises, right? Unless you change the form of the argument. I mean, you could go for something like an inference to the best explanation type thing, and then you're not necessarily going to have that in your premises. You can kind of reason that best explains these sorts of things. But as long as you're going for something like a deductive argument, they're going to have to be there. And I think that that's where it becomes incredibly hard or even contentious whether it's possible to make this sort of argument in a non-question begging way, because any sort of premise that might seem neutral that you're appealing to, for example, about the way that early human societies were constructed or about game theoretic benefits of altruism or something like that, those aren't going to get you closer to that conclusion. You're going to have to somehow attach them to an additional premise that says something about those kind of metaphysical commitments in philosophy of language, philosophy of mind, and so on. And so I think that's probably always going to be an issue in terms of the better direction maybe to go in. Something, a type of argument that sometimes people who are Platonists try to kind of come up with what's called like indispensability arguments, where they will argue that, for example, the best explanation. I mean, this happens in scientific realism discourse and philosophy of mathematics discourse. They will argue that, for example, the best explanation of our scientific theories and why they work will involve a kind of realist commitment to numbers or something like that, right? And then they'll say, so that's how you get like Platonism about numbers. I forget the example, but it was something like cicadas mate on like prime number cycles. And God, it's years ago since I thought about this, and it's like something to do with what explains why it's prime numbers. And if you think about it, it's kind of weird that would happen, because prime numbers are numbers where their only factors are themselves and one, right? And so the idea behind the argument is something like that numbers really exist and play a role in that explanation or something. And of course, you're still leaving the door open to these alternative explanations of what's going on there. But I think that something like that might be a better avenue for sort of human morality or something like what explains why we've arrived at the values that we have over and above all of the possible values that human societies could have that would be successful or something, right? And then you might try to interpret that through the lens of their being this type of thing. I still think it's quite a tall order because there's so many kind of commitments that go into something like objective ethics, and I think that that's where people should really have quite a modest view of what philosophy can do. But yeah, I think that that's probably a good direction to go in.
Well, I really appreciate that feedback, and I want to hear what the brother Dr. McAllister also has to say about this. But I would just want to mention one thing really quickly that I've been having. So I actually had a formal debate with a Christian about objective morality, and I'm getting ready to have another one. And debate is not something that I really do have a lot of experience in, so it was a great learning experience. Everybody so far that chimed into that said that I won that debate, but it wasn't because I made such a great argument. It's because my opponent engaged in so many logical fallacies and was unable to deal with any of the arguments that I brought up. So just by default that I was able to win that. So we'll see if the next debate I'm challenged a little bit more. And that's another reason I'm trying to really formalize this in a more functional way, because I do expect to have to be able to ultimately defend this position. The next debate is going to be about biblical morality and whether or not we should use that as the grounding for society. So I don't know how much I'll have to get into my own proposition here for that debate, but it is something I want to do in the future. So I appreciate that feedback. One thing I will say before I turn it over to Mr. McAllister is I didn't used to believe, so to speak, in transcendental things because I was having discussions with people about minds versus brains and consciousness and souls and things of this nature. And so as an agnostic, I just don't think we have a separation between the mind and the brain, for example. It's just different language we use to describe different functions of a brain. But then I started doing, and I still do think that, but then I started doing some research into this, and it turns out that there are things that you actually touched on, such as in mathematics, we actually have transcendental numbers like pi, for example, or something like that. They define it as being transcendental. And we have in physics transcendental properties that you also touched on, things that pop in and out of existence, so to speak. So without going down those rabbit holes, I do think that there may actually be a scientific explanation for something that we would define as transcendental, which has really opened up my mind to how transcendental things affect the material world. So I'm really open to a lot as far as that goes, and I appreciate you bringing those things up. So let me turn this over to Mr. McAllister here. Thank you for your patience, by the way.
Thanks. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Nathan, do you want to stay on? Okay,
Sure.
Yeah, you probably have extra stuff to say in here and correct me and jump in where you want to. But like this immediately, as I said in the chat, got me thinking about virtue ethics. The parts that I heard, I didn't hear everything from the beginning, of course. But the idea that you would ground it in human well-being, and then, first of all, the idea of human exceptionalism seems to be pretty straightforward, as we're seeing in the chat. Let me put some of this stuff up here. The idea right here, someone says, the ability to invent, use complex languages, ability to invent and manufacture tools, capacity for symbolic expression, ability to engage in mathematics, literature, and philosophy, etc. He says, sounds pretty exceptional to me. The idea that human exceptionalism, I mean, I understand I sympathize with you wanting to resist, this sort of speciesism or like be not exceptional towards humans, but that doesn't seem like it's going to do much for your ethical system, because it's really only humans who are going to operate by this ethical system. It's not animals who are going to operate by this ethical system. So why not be exceptionalist with respect to that? And also, like I say here, this immediately got me thinking virtue ethics. The idea that what is good for you, what is good for your well-being, and that's grounded in reality. Well, the virtue ethics is going to say, well, this is just what makes a human being flourish. Humans in particular, but this is about humans. What makes a human being flourish, that's what's going to be morally good for them. Of course, there are going to be things that are morally bad. And so the virtue ethicist picture of morality is a lot broader than what you normally probably inherit thinking morality is. It's just the idea that don't do this, don't do that. It's more like don't transgress this law. The virtue ethic picture of morality is what helps you to either flourish or not flourish. And so it's a much broader picture. This is why we can talk about, the certain vices. We use this in everyday language, like the vice of smoking or something like that. Not that it's like strictly morally bad, but it's bad for you because it it's not conducive to your flourishing. So it's a very broader picture of virtue ethics. But also somebody said this, so we can objectively say that it's possible to reduce harm, but do we, or say, let's say, but ought we reduce harm? Because excuse me, the same guy said up here, right here, in the second sentence, your argument doesn't deal with where the normativity comes from, right? And so that's what he's saying here. I'll put this other comment back up. The idea that it is possible to reduce harm, but why ought we reduce harm? It doesn't seem like you're so far capturing that, or the view that you're shaping here and developing is capturing like why we ought to do it that way. So any thoughts on that? Any that right there in particular, and anything I've said so far?
Two things that come to mind. The first thing is in regards to Hume's guillotine, I think is what it's referred to with the is-ought problem. I think the hidden premise is that what we're talking about, the propagation of our species. So we ought to reduce harm because as a species, we require that. If we don't, we won't survive long term. And maybe I'm missing something on that. The other thing I would say in regards to virtue.
Interject
ahead,
here?
yeah.
Sorry. So that seems like a completely different project than what you're trying to do here. Are you trying to, like, okay, so given the three options of grounding morality, either biological or evolutionary, number one, two, kind of social constructed, social political, and then three, transcendental. Of those three, are you just saying that your objective ethics system is going to be grounded in biology then?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
But I do think that there is unless I'm missing something, I'm under the impression that what is transcendental needs to ultimately comport to the material world in its effect. If it doesn't affect the material world, then what is its purpose? How can we even think it even exists transcendentally? I'm not communicating this very clearly. I do apologize.
No, that's fine. Yeah. So it gets me to thinking about the interactionism problem, the problem of interactionism in the philosophy of mind. The same problem here is like, how does the non-material interact with the material? How does the physical interact with the non-physical, and so on? So it seems like you're going along with that. That's certainly something to flag, but I think that the presence of that problem alone is not justification enough to be like, oh, the transcendental doesn't exist, let alone it doesn't interact with the material world. I think any philosopher who's ever wrestled with that problem recognizes that there is interaction, but like has a hard time explaining how that interaction is happening. Does that make sense? Like they're not rejecting that it is interacting, let alone that there is transcendental. At least most philosophers who wrestle with this, and this was like debates that were happening in the modern period. We're talking like Leibniz, Spinoza, Malebranche, Descartes, and so on.
It does make sense, and the hurdle that I'm having here is trying to find ways that I can conceptualize this so that it works across the board, obviously. So I have theists on one hand who are ascribing this subjective morality. They believe in objective morality, but their definition, in my opinion, is dysfunctional because God's mind can't be objective. That's a whole nother debate. That's what our debate was last time, really focused on. The other thing is I have skeptics that are on my side of the fence who don't accept objective morality for their own purposes, for their own motivation within their own axioms. So I'm trying to find a way that I can harmonize both sides. And again, I think focusing on the reduction of harm and propagation of the species is how I feel like I can attack that. Now, I don't think I've done it effectively necessarily, but that's the angle I think I should take in regards to who was it? Aristotelian virtue. I don't know if that's ultimately what we're talking about here, where what did he say? It was a state between depravity and excess. And this is another way of efficient. Okay. And it's essentially, deficiency. I'm sorry. And this is essentially a way of harmonizing very much what I'm talking about with well-being is that the propagation, if we have much of something or too little of something, we won't survive as a species, and it won't be good for the environment that we live in. If we don't take care of the environment that we live in, then we cannot survive, which is why I have a problem with human exceptionalism. I do agree that there are exceptional traits in every single thing. Like a cheetah can run faster than everybody else. That's an exceptional quality that a cheetah has, but we don't think of cheetah exceptionalism per se as a general term. So humans, with our opposable thumbs and our large brains and our ability to articulate language, we certainly have exceptional traits, but do we have a moral or ethical exceptionalism over other living beings? I'm not sure if I necessarily can agree with that. That's, I guess, a separate.
let me bring up some of these chat that are dealing with exactly what you're saying. So he says here, the propagation of the species, the ground of moral action, that would appear to open the door to a wide array of things commonly regarded as immoral, actually being morally sound. Like if your sole goal is just to propagate species, like you can now endorse, and I guess we got to censor it for YouTube, grape, right? Because that's going to propagate the species. You can endorse pillaging and the taking of other people's research, because that will propagate the species more effectively than maybe just letting them live on their own. And then you have this prior question that somebody asks, why ought we continue to propagate at all? Like, why is that a command or ultimatum?
Yeah, no, before we go on to the other, let me
yeah, go ahead.
address the one point. So in regards to this, I would disagree two things. First of all, I'm trying to tie free will into this, an imposition of free will. So grape certainly is a massive imposition of free will. The other thing I would say is that if we have a society that allows grape, that society will ultimately collapse under its own weight, in my opinion. And so therefore our species cannot propagate long term, because we can't be stealing from each other, murdering from each other, graping each other. We can't be promoting the imposition of free will, because ultimately, in my opinion, that doesn't hold up under its own weight. The activity will eventually fall apart. Society will eventually crumble.
So, but notice what you're doing here. You're now adding a condition onto your system. Not just propagate species. That can be like the first primary moral command, let's say, or principle. But now it's got to be like, well, it's got to be sustainable in the sense of like long-term stability. Okay, it's got to be coherent, consistent, and it might, at some point, it seems like you might be importing certain moral things, like you can't be mean to each other. Like, like I could give you like a really propagative, consistent, long-term solution that's going to be highly immoral. And at some point, it seems like you're going to have to import, oh, by the way, you can't do that immoral thing, which goes to show that like your system that you're building doesn't seem like it's being all that consistent with respect to just what it's using here. It keeps borrowing from outside of it. Does that make any sense?
It does. I don't know if you heard the earlier part in my premises, but I did actually mention that imposition of free will is a major factor in here. So
yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, it's all tied together, as opposed to just pirating in things as needed. But it does need to be more fully developed. That's the one thing I definitely agree with.
Are you familiar?
Go ahead.
Are you familiar with this as well? Kant's. It just sounded like what you were describing as well. Hypothetical. Kant has a categorical imperative, but a hypothetical is like, if I want society to flourish in this case, then I ought to do blank about this. And it seems like, as I said, you're importing these other, moral imperatives, moral principles, and so on into your system that didn't belong there before, and you didn't need yet until you needed it. So yeah, I agree. Thinking about it more helps, but not that this is like going to destroy the system that you're building or anything. But I think it's a good lesson going forward. It's like, do what I have right here as a meta ethical system or normative ethical system, whichever one you're trying to build, is what I have here like internally consistent and independent of those other systems, or do I keep like a buffet approach? Do I keep just borrowing from other systems that I used before? Anyway, thoughts on that. And Nathan, feel free to jump in here as well. Sorry.
Yeah, that does make sense. And you guys have given me so much to chew on. Nathan, did you have anything else you wanted to throw at me so that I could work on this? Because you've been very patient, and I know you have a lot of insight.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say is that if you were just asking me what I think of it, I guess my issue is all going to be to do with the content of what is meant here by objective morality, and I don't think that there's a coherent account of that can be given. So that will always be a kind of pitfall for me for like whether that is pushed into some premise or pushed into the conclusion in like an abductive style argument. I'm always going to have an issue with just understanding what I'm even supposed to be sort of thinking of here. And one of the kind of calling cards, I think, of sort of under specified or contentless sort of theories, and I know that sounds very aggressive, but I don't mean it, is kind of ad hocness, because often when someone introduces a concept that isn't operationalized very well, the problem is that if they're using that to provide some kind of explanation or account of something, then for every kind of question that gets raised, they have to introduce some kind of additional modification to deal with that specific question or case, right? There's no kind of unifying account or appeal to the operationalization of the concept to actually explain why it's being used in that way. And I think that's a little bit of that is, I think, the issue that Derek raised as well, where, like for some of these questions, you end up having to kind of respond to them by telling a sort of story about, well, if that happened, then this would happen to society, and then this would happen to, and there's a lot of moving parts to even each of those explanations. I mean, just knowing human history, we know all of the kind of crazy ways that human cultures and society and beliefs and things can go and turn out. And, in those stories that you're telling, you need all of those kind of stars to kind of align just for this one thing to one response to the theory. So it feels very much like the theory is being drawn around what it's supposed to explain, and then it becomes very kind of heavy rather than it sort of unifying things in a way that then once you introduce the theory, all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, wow, it all kind of fits together. It seems sort of maybe the way of describing it's like poorly motivated, or it raises that question of like, well, what hang on, why do I want to buy into all of this? Like, that's not helping me understand things now. It's kind of introducing just even more problems.
No, gentlemen, your feedback on this has been invaluable, and I do hope the brother posts this video so I can refer to it several times, because I just couldn't write that fast. These are some great things for me to think about, and this is definitely a learning experience for me. And I'm certainly willing to have my mind changed. That's one of the beauties of being a skeptic, as opposed to having a dogmatic viewpoint of things. And so you guys are giving me a lot to chew on, and I really, really appreciate you letting me jump on here ahead of the line. And I will defer to you guys, and if you want, I'll jump back into the chat and let you guys,
of course,
do your thing.
Yeah, a couple other things. First of all, if there's anybody wondering what the show is about, it is a live call-in show. Objective Ethics jumped in here first. I didn't hear him at first. We had some technical issues. Nathan jumped on, and they began a conversation. We all began a conversation, but this is just open to anybody. So once these gentlemen leave, then it can be any topic whatsoever. You can continue the questions that you that are arising from this conversation. Feel free to jump in. But the way to do that, of course, is to look at the pinned comment, that black one at the top of the chat box. If you're in the chat box, you know where the chat box is. So just at the top of that. So yeah, feel free to jump on. And then, of course, read the description of the video as well to get just more information on what's going on here. But yeah, there's one other comment here that somebody put as well. It'd be helpful if you define what you mean by objective morality. Do you want to give that a go before you leave?
So the idea that I'm trying to come up with by tying the words objective and morality together, and this might be my biggest weakness in this argument, is I'm trying to think of something that is objectively true, irregardless of whatever we're talking about, that's actually objectively true. So if it's true in all cases, it's objective, right? And it's part of reality, it's true. And then I'm trying to tie that to morality, which is what we're actually talking about. So if morality is true, it's objectively true in all cases. Then
what do you mean by objective? Because you said in all cases, so like, or it's just true, or it's just real.
So in all cases would be, so it's always in all cases. We could take any, and this is the other thing, is that ultimately what we have to do is because we are approaching everything subjectively, because we have to determine what's valid and what's not valid. So subjectively, we're using our own minds, irregardless of what's actually happening objectively. We have to subjectively approach everything. So we have to take each topic, every single situation, and judge it independently from everything else. So you can pick any example that you want. And some people have thrown some really hard ones at me because I don't believe in human exceptionalism. So squashing termites, and you name it, I've had to field a lot of questions. But if we just focus on the human factor here, you could take is stealing or is grape or any situation that you want, and say, is this always going to be immoral in every possible universe, in every possible situation? Is stealing always going to be immoral? And I would say that if there is an objective law of morality, yes, it's always immoral. However, what we need to do is weigh every action against the alternative action or against another action that's happening. So I used an example before where I teach self-defense, right? We teach people how to defend themselves, but we don't teach people how to fight. We don't word it that way, right? So if I'm walking down the street and somebody attacks me and we end up in a fist fight, right? I am technically justified legally for every punch I throw because I'm defending myself, even though we're both throwing punches. However, I would argue that I'm acting immorally by throwing those punches, even though I'm legally justified, because we're both acting immorally, but I'm defending myself. I did not initiate the combat, and I'm defending myself. I have a right to my free will. He's imposing on my free will by attacking me. And so that's where we have to base which is going to be ultimately justified, even though two things can be immoral.
Got you. Okay. You hit on a couple of different things there. So the last part you were just, I think, just trying to identify the distinction between legality and morality. And that's a pretty standard distinction. Even though something could be illegal, doesn't mean it's immoral, and vice versa, and so on. With respect to objectivity, most metaethics scholars will say that objectivity, or something that's objective, just means that it's mind independent. I think a lot of people agree on that. Some people just say that it's real, and that real just means mind independent. In other words, like, yes, as you described, when you're using your own mind, it's going to be like how I feel. You're going to import these sort of feelings and attitudes towards it. But so, or you might say that morality is dependent on those things. So just how I feel just is the morality. And that would be subjectivity or subjectivism. And so objective or real or mind independent morality would just be, well, it's just like physical laws. They are what they are, regardless of how I feel about them. So does that seem to track with like what you're saying, objectivity or objective ethics are? Okay.
Absolutely. I should have focused on mind dependence, because that's my argument against God's objective morality, is because God has a mind, so God cannot inherently be objective. But so that's exactly the approach I would take to this.
Okay. Yeah. So I hear that a lot, actually. That would open up a can of worms here. And maybe we want to do this. The idea that, Nathan, do you have thoughts on this? The idea that people will object to God. Well, they'll object to objective ethics just by saying, well, God, if God exists, then you have to believe in subjective morality or something, because at least you have one person whose mind morality is dependent on. Like, does that make it a subjective ethics, or does that make it objective ethics, maybe with an asterisk by it? What do you think? Have you ever thought about this?
Yeah. I mean, I do think that this objection is actually quite good for a lot of the things that some people say that they're doing with these sorts of arguments in the philosophy of religion space. And I actually do think that for many, I mean, obviously it's not going to be all, but many times what people are actually concerned about is a different concept to objectivity. And that is something like authority instead, or bindingness, or finality, or arbitration. Like these sorts of concepts seem to me to be the actual concerns that people have. It's kind of like, well,
that sounds right to me,
and get away with it, or something like that. And so actually, I don't, even though I think that the objections are often accurate, I don't think they undermine the project necessarily, because I just think that maybe people were a bit mistaken in the first place about what their concern was. Because objectivity isn't going to settle arbitration or finality or authority.
That's a really great point.
Yeah.
It has to do with, it seems that, because if it's just a human saying, well, because I said so, my subjective morality wins out, it seems really arbitrary. But that's not the case with God. It's not an arbitrary thing. And there's a lot more finality, it seems. Like if you're talking about the creator of all the universe, the ground of all reality, and that, and so on and so forth, it's not just, Joe who lives down the street. It's like his decisions carry a lot more weight than that guy does. And so, yeah, this as you said, the arbitration, the finality of it, the groundedness of it, and so on. Yeah,
it's also kind of, I mean, the worrying aspect, I think, for some people is that it also does end up depending on power as well, in the sense that God can do what he wants and enact what he wants, and there's essentially nothing you can do about it, which is, sounds very, and is very prone to abuse if you've just got that and nothing else, right? In the sense that if it were people, and we were to model our morality just based on that, it would be kind of might makes right. And I think that that is maybe the disconcerting or unsettling aspect of these models of morality with God, is kind of like that it does make God the final authority, and if you dispute or disagree with God's values in these models, it will appear to you to be incredibly tyrannical and bad, and and it if these models are correct, it then becomes, well, kind of, what, there's nothing you can do about that, or it doesn't matter, or
Yeah.
and there is something that if you can consider or empathize that from the outside, or someone, and that might mean and this is where maybe it becomes more difficult to empathize, because that might mean trying to consider yourself having values that you would consider to be really horrible, right? If you were sort of to misalign your values from what you consider God's to be. But it's less about kind of sympathizing with those values and more about just understanding what a kind of terrifying sight it would be to just think of the world as being that way, and not sharing those values that God shares, but then not being able to do anything about it. And that leans into, then, I think, bigger theological questions about justice and stuff. But that's the direction I go with all that.
Nice. Yeah, that's really insightful. Thank you. Guys, this has been super duper helpful and illuminating. Hopefully it's been helpful for you as well. Not just subjective ethics, but Nathan as well. You've been like so tremendous, dude. Thanks for stepping up and answering a bunch of questions. Like, this is why like getting together like this is helpful, because you get the minds together, and it's not about like who wins the debate. It's not just debate me, bro, I'll show you why you're wrong and all this stuff. And it's very aggressive. So I really appreciate you guys buying into this model that I'm trying to promote and so on. Because it reminds me like it was in grad school with some minds just around, or maybe like I have a fire pit in our backyard, and I love just getting back there with the glass of bourbon and with friends and just kicking it, and just hanging out, or down here in the library or something. So I really appreciate you guys. You've been really helpful. Any last words? We have someone waiting in the studio, and then last words from each of you, and then
just let me dip out of here really quick, but I just want to close as usual by thanking you, Dr. McAllister, for opening up this platform. You're very gracious to do that. And as I've said to you many times, I've been very complimentary of you for trying to bring people together for a civil conversation. And the other thing I want to do is thank Nathan for not only saving the day here, but also for just giving me a lot of really good things to chew on and ways to approach this. I find you to be very intelligent, and I really respect your opinion, and it was an absolute pleasure to meet you. So I'll get out of your guys' hair.
Cool. Thanks, man. And Nathan.
Yeah, no, just thanks both. As a self-deprecating British person, I can't, there's only so many sort of like patting each other on the back that I could take before I've got to get sarcastic about it. But yeah, I enjoyed talking to you both. And if there's one cheeky thing I would say before I go, is that the objective/subjective or realism/anti-realism debate is a psyop. People need to realize it's a psyop, and then they can get onto the real discussions of philosophy.
Yeah. Like, that reminds me of what Lance Bush, Lance Independent, says, that at the end of the day, that, I mean, obviously philosophers are interested in that, but like regular people, this has no bearing on their life. Like, meta-ethical view, which one's correct, realism, anti-realism, that doesn't matter. It's the normative theories that matter, and it's the applied ethics that matter. But yeah.
That is my I view it very politically, and that's why one of my sort of things I say is I often call realism falsehoodism and anti-realism truthhoodism, because obviously there's the connotation of realism is we really believe in anti-realism. It's kind of like this PR, or like like in politics when people call something like a death tax because people don't want to be associated with death or whatever. It's kind of like that sort of thing, and it really does do a lot of damage, I think, to people think about these things. But I can, someone's waiting a while, I'll leave that and we can talk about it some other time.
Yeah, cool, man. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate you, and I'll look forward to talking with you next time.
Yeah, see you around.
All right, see ya. All right, cool. So just a reminder, we have Nick here. I'm about to bring you on. For anybody who's in the chat, you guys have been really great so far, interacting with each other, and then and they're leaving excellent comments for me to show our guests as well. But yeah, a reminder, this is just a call-in show. As it says in the title, the link is at the top of the chat box. So we have our next guest we'll bring on here. But for anybody who wants to join in, you can join in. It's free and open to anybody. So I'll bring you on, Nick, and tell us a little bit about yourself and what do you want to talk about?
Hey, what's going on?
Hi.
Nick.
Nice to meet you.
Is that a real background, or is that
That's
a
real.
Zoom
Yeah,
background?
that's
That is
real.
amazing.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, I'm just a fan of philosophy. Been listening to a lot of these debates. You mentioned Lance Bush. I was just listening to one of his, and I kind of just had some I started reading this book on Introduction to Metaethics.
Oh, cool. Who's that by? Andrew?
This is by Andrew Fisher.
Okay, cool.
And I kind of had some very basic questions that I don't think the book had time to go through. Kind of just about metaethics broadly that I was hoping I could kind of get some feedback on.
For sure, yeah. Yeah. I have not heard of him before, so I just looked him up. Cool. He looks like he's at Birmingham or something. So he's a Christian, by the way. That's what Nathan says. So interesting. Yeah. So I actually I had it out and I was cleaning up, tidying up here, and I just put a metaethics Introduction to Metaethics on my shelf. I forget who it's by. But anyway, yeah. I've not seen that one. So yeah, what struck your fancy in those?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first it basically overviews some of the main different views, which I'm slowly working through. But one thing I was curious about, because in the intro of this book, Andrew Fisher distinguishes between moral language. So what do people mean when they say something is wrong, and moral ontology? Are there these moral properties? And I guess that distinction kind of opened up a few questions for me. The first one being can you have your worldview on each of those questions be completely distinct? Could you believe that objective morality exists ontologically, but that just nobody refers to it? Is that an option in metaethics that anyone holds, or is that
yeah?
I'm
Oh yeah,
something?
yeah. Because that's the distinction between metaphysics and epistemology. The idea that it could be the case that, let's say, the number of stars in the universe is odd right now, before any star deaths or births or anything like that. At a certain time, given a finite universe, it's odd. Let's just suppose that's the case. Could be that nobody ever believes that. That's just the state of the world is like that, and just people are misinformed about their own beliefs.
And would it still make sense to call those ontological properties, good and evil, even if what everyone means is something else like preference?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, let's say, to clarify, so to be more precise, you asked if it'd be right to call them that. I mean, we're using human language when we do that. So let me phrase it this way. It would be right to say of them. I don't know if this makes any difference, but it'd be right if someone were to say of them, it would be correct and a real feature of the world that they were good, even though nobody's currently saying that now.
Got it. Okay. And then I guess maybe just to poke on this a little bit more and make sure I understand. So someone who's committed, I forgot what the term is. Someone who's committed, and it's not. If you just, it's your preference. That's what you're voicing with moral claims. Is it not the case that therefore good just definitionally becomes whatever the world uses that word for, and therefore rules out these other ontological things taking part in the conversation?
Okay, run that by me one more time.
Yeah, and I might not be able to phrase this, if so, I'll just move on to the next question.
That's all right.
So it seems that what we call good and bad are going to be driven by usage of those words. And so if everyone's just on the same page, let's say everyone was united that good and bad just meant I don't like it or I like it.
Yeah.
Then would we still, and also these moral ontological properties of good and bad exist. Would we still call those ontological properties good and bad, even though we all are on the same page of good and bad, just meaning things you like? Or would they be just...
So are we assuming that it's real of those properties? The state of the universe just is such that those properties are real. Let's just assume objective ethics, realism, and so on, that's the state of the world.
Yeah.
Are you asking what would the state of our language attributions be then? Is that kind of where the question is? Like if we called them good and we think it's subjective, would that be correct? Is that kind of what you're asking?
Maybe I'll move on because I think I need to spend more time thinking about that.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, maybe I'm just misunderstanding. Sorry.
No. It's good. I was on shaky ground with that one.
All right, no problem.
So I guess next part. This will be my last kind of question here. Is so one thing that struck me with the different views is that they all, as far as I can tell in this book, it seemed like they were all exclusive. Like if moral realism is true, moral anti-realism is false. And I guess I was curious, like sometimes I talk to people and the way they use moral language just seems completely different than the way I do.
Yeah.
So I would maybe describe them as like subjectivist or the way they're thinking about it. But maybe I am thinking about morality in like an objective way. Like when I mean it, I actually mean I think there's some objective grounding to it.
Yeah.
If that's true, if we really are thinking about it and using the words differently, are both metaethical views true? Like
no.
how would that work?
No. Because this is like if you were it's not the case that like we're speaking different languages. Like you call, I don't know, I can't use like regular words like pizza or hot dog. Let's just say I don't know, a tree. Right? And in French, it's arbre. So if I say a tree and you say arbre, or vice versa, like we're speaking different languages, we're saying something true of the same thing. That's not what's happening. That's not what's happening here. And I think that's probably what he means by like they're mutually exclusive. The idea that somebody would be speaking as if objective, I won't even say as an objectivist, because I would say speaking as if objectivism is true. They believe that to be the real view of the world. And then same thing for the person who speaks as if subjectivism is true. They're saying different things. They're not agreeing with each other, and it's mutually exclusive. And so both theories can't be true. It can't be. Now it is true, if you back up, it is true that one identifies as an objectivist because they believe that is the correct theory, and another identifies as subjectivist for the same reason. And so it's true that one's an objectivist, one's a subjectivist. So that part's true. One is speaking as an objectivist, one's speaking as a subjectivist. But it's not the case that what they are saying is like mutually compatible. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I guess the part where I'm a little bit confused still is like if we put the ontological question aside and we just look at the moral language question, it just seems odd to me to look for one answer to that. Like, what do people mean when they talk about morality? Like, couldn't it just be the case that different people mean different things? And so
it's possible. Yeah. And this is what Lance does in his work, because he's a social psychologist. He's not a philosopher. He has philosophy background, and he's studied with philosophers, and he's had philosophers on his dissertation committee. He's interacted with them, and so on. And he knows the literature. But in his own like academic work and his dissertation and so on, it's purely really descriptive. It's like, what do people think about? Okay. What do your average people on the street think about this? Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, that's helpful. Cool. That was it for me. I appreciate it. Just kind of
wish I had more for you. Yeah, but those are some really interesting questions. So if you have any more, definitely come back.
All right. Thank you, Dr. McAllister.
All right, no problem. Talk to you later. Bye. All right, cool. Awesome. So we have another guest here I'm about to bring on, and that's so funny. I don't know where this comment is coming from. It's just hilarious to me. Just remember, I ate my girlfriend's chocolate bar yesterday. She had to go get me. And I was meant to buy another. You should see. I have a complete chocolate drawer in our fridge because I'm kind of a crazy person about chocolate, and I tell my wife to stay out of it. And if it's ever empty, we have to refill it. I'm very serious about my chocolate stuff. So yeah, that's right. Lance does have an MA in philosophy, so he does have done some real philosophical chops and background. So all right, so I'll bring our next guest, but just as a reminder. The way the show goes, in case you're joining now or joining anytime soon, that this is a call-in show. The link is at the very top of the chat box, so call in. Anybody is welcome to call in at any time, and we'll get you on here when you come. So, all right, cool. So I have here a guy named goes by Modern Atheism. So good to see you. Thanks for coming. Hi. Tell me a little bit about yourself and what do you want to talk about?
Okay, so my name is Juan. And despite what my name says, I'm actually an agnostic. But my channel is called Modern. I have a channel. I'm a YouTuber, and it's called Modern Atheism for broad issues.
Okay, cool. You have a channel called Modern Atheism, but you yourself are, is that what you said? But you yourself are an agnostic. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just correcting your audio here.
That's right. Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
So I have a question, an initial question. Does a necessary being, if a being is necessary, can this being have any contingent properties, or are all these properties also necessary? Do you understand the question?
Is the question, if God exists, can God have any contingent properties?
No, the question, if a being is necessary,
if
there is a necessary, can this being have any contingent properties?
If a being is necessary, can this being have any contingent properties?
Yes.
That's a great question, actually. I haven't thought about it. I would probably guess no, but you're asking me this for a reason, so what do you think?
Oh, yeah, okay, that's the reason. I'm looking at an interesting argument by an by a Muslim scholar. It's called the argument from distinction. And it attempts to show, it's an argument against polytheism. It attempts to prove that polytheism is logically impossible. And the way it's done this is that if you have a necessary being, then it can be shown that there can be, okay, I'm going to read you the syllogisms, if that's okay. It's not very long.
Mm-hmm.
He's saying, okay, there cannot be two distinct necessary beings, because if two beings are distinct, they must have some differentiated, some property must be different. Now, the properties are either contingent or necessary. Now, here's one premise, that's premise number 2. Premise number 3 is that if a property is contingent, then this being depends on a contingent property, and thus cannot be really necessary. He's saying that a necessary being cannot have any contingent properties. So that's why I made this initial question. I wanted to ask.
Can I? Sorry, go. Yeah, let me interject here. Sorry for this, but I think it's going to matter what you consider properties to be, right? Because you can have relational properties. Like God, let's say, is a necessary being. In Christian theology, I'm Catholic, I'm Christian theist, and so on. And according to this tradition, God is a necessary being. But if you construe properties in a very broad sense to include relational properties, then God is going to have the property, like relational properties, like I have the property of being 6 inches from this microphone. Okay. I have the property of being in this space on this day, like that's relational space-wise and so on. So, or I have the property of, so anytime God creates, then he's going to acquire, let's say, a new property of the property of being related to this creature as its creator. Like, and that seems a little weird, but that's only because I've construed, or philosophers who do this have construed properties very broadly to be like weird things, not just like omniscience. You know what I mean? It's like, it seems like you're popping new properties into existence really arbitrarily. So I think in this argument, those properties would all be contingent, because if he didn't create that creature, well, he wouldn't have the property. He could either have it or not have it. So I think this argument may depend on that.
For example, God has the property of being the creator of a world with 7 billion people, but the world could have had 10 million people. So there is one property that at least that it seems contingent in a way. What they could say maybe is that it actually, the world that God created, that it was logically necessary for God to create this world. So that actually the property, it may seem contingent, but no, it's actually necessary. It was necessary for God to create this specific world.
Yeah.
They could say that, at least.
Yeah. And you can, for lack of a better term, bundle properties like this. Instead of saying the single property, relative property of being related to this new creature, you could just say, well, he has the necessary property of being creator, and then of course he's going to create, and then just like whatever new property, contingent property, of relative property that I just described, those weird ones, I will just put those all under the property of just being creator. And so I don't need all these new fangled contingent properties. We're just going to put it under that necessary property, and it's going to it's a matter of like categorization at that point.
Yeah. So there's another premise. It says that if a property, if this necessary being has a property, then this necessary property, then this property is necessary, and this property is necessary for all necessary beings. Like if this property is necessary, then and the other being will have the same. So in another way, another God cannot be different in any way, because if it's like necessary, the being is necessary, then all its properties will be necessary. That's kind of what I understand here, right?
Can I jump in here? So that doesn't seem right to me, unless you're talking about God as divine being and absolute being and absolute one, oneness and so on. Like you're going to identify all the transcendentals. And Aquinas gets into this and he says, look, at this point, you can't have more than one of those, because by definition, it's just going to be one that has all unity within him. Because how could you have a thing that has unity with all differentiation? So you can only have one. Now, so at that point, it's it. But I got there by thinking this. This is what I thought before I thought that. It doesn't seem to me that a necessary being, let's say, because you could have a necessary being that's not God, let's assume.
Yeah, that's right.
It doesn't seem that you could have a necessary being that has a property, and that property now be necessary of all other necessary beings. You know what I mean? Like it just happens to, it can be necessary of that necessary being, but it's not the case that it's necessary of all other necessary beings. That's a completely different claim.
Yeah, that's right. I thought the same. Like, okay, it doesn't mean that because a necessary being has a certain property, you will say it's because it was necessary that all necessary beings have this property. Like, I don't know, it's because the property also was necessary. I'm not sure. I think.
Yeah, that's a premise that really needs a lot of support. Yeah, I'd say that was a really faulty premise, and that's one I would that's one of them that I would address for sure. Sorry, are there more premises?
No, that's the conclusion is that the de facto can neither be a differentiating property, cannot be contingent. Different contingent properties cannot have different necessary properties. A necessary being cannot have any contingent properties, and if any property is necessary, then it is necessary for all necessary beings. Then it will be the same. So it cannot have any different properties. So it will be, if all the properties are the same, they will be the same. Like there is nothing that will differentiate them. So
now, if that you could if you were convinced by this argument, and the conclusion is that all necessary beings must have all the same necessary properties, let's assume that for the sake of argument. This is where what I mentioned about Aquinas would come in. He would just say, by the way, there can't be more than one of these, because that necessary being would also have the perfection of unity. And if you have the perfection of unity, you can't be variation. You can't have variation in you. You have to be unified. So you can only be one, if that makes sense. And so it's a weird kind of argument. Actually, you could use this indirectly to argue for unity. It's a really weird indirect way to do it, but that's if you buy the conclusion. What remind me what the conclusion is? What is this person trying to argue?
Right, it's trying to say that there cannot be there cannot be multiple necessary beings. There can only be one necessary being.
Oh, okay, yeah. That makes sense then. Yeah, that's I think what Aquinas would agree with as well. That's interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. What scholar is that? Will you either now or later? Will you put it in the chat? The name.
He's called Burhan al-Tamajus. I can put a link to it in the comments.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Do that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. I think that's all for now. Right.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you for bringing that to my attention. And I'll go look at that argument as well, so I can give it a closer look. Yeah. It's hard, like when you're just, even I'm like a visual learner, so I have to read it, you know what I mean? And so just hearing it, those are my first thoughts. I may have like other things to say later, but thanks for bringing it to my attention, and thanks for coming on.
I don't know, maybe if you have time, like you can think, what do you think about the concept of a necessary being, right? Mm-hmm. I never, like, this comes up in the context of, for example, the moral ontological argument, like, okay, a being is necessary. What it means is that it has to exist, right? It logically has to exist. But, or is it metaphysically has to exist? Because I am like, okay, to say that something, a being logically has to exist, for me, the only way that this is true is if the non-existence of this being leads to a direct logical contradiction. Okay, that's like the only way that a being is like logically necessary for me. But one could say that there is like metaphysically a way that a being has to exist. I don't know. What do you think about this concept of a necessary being? You think this makes sense? You know?
Yeah. Are you familiar with the argument from contingency?
I kind of, yeah.
It's well, it's if you're familiar with Aquinas' 5 ways, it's his third way. The idea that you would have a set. I actually have a video on this. It's an earlier live stream. So if you go to my channel, go to the live tab, you'll see a bunch of these call-in shows. But like earlier on, you'll see the 5 ways that I did, and it's number 3 because I have one video on number 1, 2, 3 because it's 5 ways, and then another video on just number 4 and 5. So go to the first one, 1 through 3, and look at the third one, argument from contingency. And this would be on the plane of rationality and contradiction. You can't have a set of only contingent things. So that would be a way to establish a necessary being. Now, just caveat here. So go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry. That's but after observing that something exists, right? If we know that something exists, okay, then they must be caused by something else. But I mean, a priori, from pure logic, right? Is there any way to say, okay, if a being, right, a being is necessary, this to prove the statement, this being is necessary, right? To you know what I mean? Like, okay, we observe something, right? Then we can see, okay, this thing must be caused by something else, and it needs to end in a necessary thing. But a priori, if we hadn't observed it, it's not like anything, you know?
I don't know if there's any a priori arguments for a necessary being. I mean, unless you consider Anselm's ontological argument to be an a priori argument, which is possible. I mean, I think a lot of people do consider that. You don't need any external observation. But Aquinas on this third way, the contingency argument, is not an a priori argument. It does use an empirical observation, especially in the very first premise. It's like I look out into the world, I see that things are contingent, but it's like you use reductio ad absurdum. So it's like let's assume for the sake of argument, all things are contingent. And that's what leads to an absurdity. So on pain of accepting that absurdity, you got to assume that, or you got to infer and conclude that there has to be at least one. There could be more, just if you're using that argument alone. I mean, but then you'd have to couple that argument with the unity argument, that there can't be more than one. But all that to say, I was going to say earlier, caveat with the 5 ways and with many arguments, you have to understand what they're going for. And Aquinas, his argument, his 5 ways are meant for beginners in theology, and they're not aimed at atheists. They're aimed at seminarians, basically, people who were like studying to become priests. So just take it, for what it's worth and so on. He's not, if you're already like super duper skeptical and you're just going to dismiss like a lot of the stuff, you're not going to have a lot of common ground, then of course you're not going to like accept the conclusion. But, and of course, if he had that different audience, then he would have framed it a different way. But anyway, caveat there. But yeah, that's where I would go. I'm for sure that Aquinas' third way, none of the 5 ways are a priori. They all use empirical observation.
Right. I mean, do you think the first cause argument in the way Aquinas formulated that is still sound today, that it still works?
I think so. Yeah. I think a lot of people do as well. Yeah. If an argument sounds, it's going to be sound forever. But you're asking whether it's whether people consider it to be a good argument or whether it's been debunked. A lot of people, you're going to see a lot of YouTubers, a lot of YouTube comment people, a lot of laymen, philosophers who think they've debunked it. But anytime I've seen anything about that, it's usually people who just aren't understanding it. Same with a lot of other common arguments like the ontological argument, like Pascal's wager. It's just a lot of people just not understanding what they're trying to say. And they think they are, and also being really uncharitable. Like they're saying, oh, he must mean this, he must be an idiot. Like that's not going to get you anywhere if you're trying to understand an argument. So for the people that understand it and can like really elaborate on it, there are a lot of people who still hold that to be a very strong argument.
Okay. I have one big question on
Sure.
on it. Actually, my main objection is like, why can't this first cause be a material or natural in nature? Why does it have to be a mind? Like, what is the response to that?
Ooh, why does it have to be a man?
Mind.
A mind. Oh, okay.
Mind.
As opposed to what?
Well, I mean, as opposed to a thing, as opposed to, let's say, I would postulate a quantum vacuum, right? That somehow fluctuates and causes the universe to exist, right?
So
because that's what some atheists say.
So this is my take on that. I think that if you have a creator of the universe, it can't just be just an inert object, because then it won't act unless something is acted upon it, right? It's just...
Why can't an object act?
An object can act in a derivative sense if something has affected it, like it's in the chain of cause and events, or cause and effects, right? So if an object acts on it, if an external cause acts on it, sure, it can then act in the derivative sense on other. But the act or agent, it has to be an agent, because an agent is something that's from the Latin word agere. It just means to act as a person does, or as an agent does. Doesn't have to be a person, but usually is, but an agent. So something that can act on other things of its own volition. So if you have a creator who is the origin or a necessary being, like let's say it couldn't have been like a mathematical number 3, let's say that's the creator of the universe, right? Because like 3 is just going to sit there for all of eternity. It's not going to act on anything. It's not going to make any changes or anything, right? But like it has to be something that can have the power to act and to initiate a creation event, if that makes any sense.
Well, why can't, for example, an object, let's say a quantum vacuum, I'm not sure if object is the right word, but yeah, let's say material weird thing, like somehow either cause the universe or transform it to the universe. I don't understand why exactly can't an object act. What makes it? I think an atom can act by itself. It can decay. It doesn't need to be acted on by another atom to decay, for example. The atom by itself, right, is something internal to the atom, for example, a radioactive atom.
I understand that, and I sympathize with that, but that seems to me like me saying, look, a baby can grow, or an acorn can grow, and it's like, yeah, they can do those things, but it's because of certain preconditions. It's because of what came before that affected it, that made the acorn, that made the baby, and it's the DNA within them that drives them to follow the instructions within that coded DNA to make it do what it's supposed to do. Same thing with an atom. Like, why is it doing that thing? It's very orderly. It's very seemingly intentional. Like even atheists, even famous atheists, like Neil deGrasse Tyson, for example, he will say that he acknowledges there is at least the appearance of order in the universe. Like, he disagrees that it is real order, but he acknowledges there's at least the appearance of order in the universe. These things don't just happen. They're very orderly. And then the question becomes like, well, why are they so orderly? Because if it's all chaos and there's no meaning to it and there's no order to it, then it shouldn't be doing what it's doing. An atom shouldn't be operating the way that it does and acting on other things. Does that make sense?
Okay. I'm not sure based on what do you say that an atom shouldn't be acting the way an atom acts. I don't really get that. But I have a question. How about a supernova or exploding gas? Do you think this is order? This is also a form of order, or is it more accurate to say some things have order and some things have less order? And you will see the entire range in the universe.
That's a great question, actually, because it gets into sin. Interestingly, like in Christian theology, they would just say that you have more order to the degree that you are more holy. You have less order, or you're disordered to the degree that you aren't holy, or that you engage in sin or live a life of sin, right? That, in other words, like, just think about the soul, right? So like, I can become disordered, right, in my soul. And not that like when, let's say if I have a psychological disorder, that's not an illness in the sense of some foreign body, like a virus attacking my body, and now I have that virus. That is something that was here, and now it's out of order. So there's chaos or disorder in that respect for sure, and there might be other instances of that in the universe, absolutely. But as a whole, there's also a recognizable order in the sense of like following certain laws according to physics and so on.
Okay, sure. Okay, that's interesting. But going back to what you say about how an eternal object, like inert object, it seems like it cannot act. Okay, why do you include the word inert? I never said it was inert, but I understand what you mean because it's eternal, right? And kind of timeless. So when you imagine an object that's like eternal, I also imagine it would be static, right? And I also imagine it seems obvious to me that it cannot then suddenly cause something, right? That it will stay static forever. If it's eternal and it's an object, like it will stay static forever. That also that intuition, I also share that intuition. Like I couldn't do anything. But I think that a being maybe it actually has the same problem when you imagine a being that is actually timeless and eternal. When you think about it, it just humans cannot really grasp the concept of timelessness. It's just too hard to imagine. But a being, how could you even think in a timeless way? It's very hard. Or how, if there is a being that is timeless and eternal, cannot also suddenly decide to create either, right? For example, like
why not?
Creation, the act, creation is an act. So there is a before and after the act. So it seems to me that the being will, the mind, conscious being will also have similar problems.
Yeah. So this is a very common objection that I hear recently, is that God couldn't have created because he's timeless and eternal. But if he did create, he can't be timeless and eternal. And so there, you'll hear other objections like, well, I guess your God's not all that powerful, or he's not timeless and not outside space and time. I guess he's one of those Greek gods. You know what I mean? This is a recent objection. It's a new objection because 20, 30, 40 years ago, atheists, well-meaning, respectable atheists, did not have like straw men with respect to the Christian view of God. They thought that God was creator, ultimate creator, absolute being, ground of all reality. But now you hear atheists talking like, oh, well, that's just a Greek god, and they kind of just simplistically toss it away. Now, with respect to the actual argument, though, that's just commentary. With respect to the actual argument, I've talked about this in some of my discussions. Like, if you go back to a discussion I had with a guy named Juan, who goes by Godless Engineer. We had a discussion, and he brought this up, and it gets into the idea of simplicity and unchangeableness or immutability. Like, if God is simple and he's immutable, then that means if he were outside of time, which, by the way, is only one theory, right? There might be other theories. It could be that God is somehow like enmeshed with time, and that time emanates from him or something. It could, and theories of time, you have either A theory or B theory of time. We talked about this on that discussion as well. But let's assume, for the argument's sake, the very popular understanding that God exists outside of time. So would he be acting? How could he ever create if he exists outside of time? Well, first of all, there is no potentiality in God. He's purely actual. This is a very central Christian doctrine. He's purely actual. That means he has no potentiality. He couldn't potentially do something. He actually is doing something or thinking something. So there is no discourse or discursive reasoning in God. All ideas are eternally present to his mind. And so even the idea to create, he didn't just all have, So this means that if you believe that time and space, let's say just time, involves change, right, of ideas at the very least, right? Well, you wouldn't have this problem with God because all his ideas are eternally present all at once. There is no discursiveness. There's no changing in his ideas. They're just eternally present to him. Now, when he creates, however, there is change, and that's not a problem because once time, let's say, comes into existence in space as well, then you have physical change, right? But the change isn't happening in God. It never was. Change is external to God. Something happens. Something happens at all. Something happens in the universe because he creates. And that's where many people think that is the beginning of time because, well, time couldn't have began before you had change. Like if you believe that, which I think this is right, that time necessarily just is the the tracking and the measurement of change. That's all it is.
Yeah, I actually have a bit of an objection with that definition.
Sure.
And I know that's a very popular definition, and time is something hard too. But I imagine this scenario. Let's say the universe has reached the point called the heat death of the universe. It's a hypothetical thing where it just reached the maximum entropy and it no longer changes. They say the universe is dead and it no longer changes. Everything is static in the universe. It seems to me in a way that time still flows. Like once the universe reaches the point of dying and nothing changes, okay, but you can still think, okay, 1 year after that, and 2 years after that, and 10 years after that, even if nothing is changing in the universe. So in a way, I'm not convinced by that definition of time is a measure of change. I think even if something remains static and doesn't change, in a way, time is still flowing. I don't know.
I mean, that gets into the metaphysics of time and what do you think time is. Then at that point, if you want to allege or claim this, then the burden is on the person alleging this or claiming this to say, well, this is just what time is. I've said that time is the measurement of change. And I think that space, by the way, doesn't really exist. It's just the gaps in between objects that exist. That's all it is. Like space is just, it's like a hole. A hole doesn't really exist.
Yeah,
it exists only like derivatively of like the dirt that you dug out, right? And now there's an absence of dirt. So space is just the absence of objects. It's the gaps. I think time's the same way. It's just the absence of unity. And when you have disunity, when you have change from one thing static to another thing that's no longer static and maybe becoming static or whatever, from being to becoming, now there is change. It's not that now there's time. It's not that time exists so much as it's just what we use to measure it by. Like time is weird. If you get into the metaphysics of time, it's really weird. It doesn't operate by physical laws, but it's more like a tool or heuristic that we use to describe physical objects. And so that's what I'm saying here. Like my metaphysics of time is just, I'm not alone in this. It's the measurement of change. Like it's not itself a thing, but it's a thing that we apply as a tool to other things. And so if someone were to say, well, I don't think that's what time is, well, then the burden of proof's on that person to say, well, this is what time is, and this is how it's inconsistent with the possibility of creation.
I think if it was like established that time is that which you say, then yes, I will have the burden of the proof in the 90s. But to the degree that okay, it's at least possible that time is something else, then you still have the burden of the proof because all the way, like at the end, you need time to be that what you say for this to be true. But if I can at least float the possibility that time is something else, then your point remains not proven, not demonstrated.
Yeah, that's fine. If you have an intuition, you're like, okay, I don't think that's right. At that point, I think what's justified is, I'm agnostic about that, or like I'm just not going to believe that. I don't know what the right answer is, but like I'm just not. It's not that I reject that, because if I reject that, that means I'm believing something that's the negation of that at the very least. So I'm going to withhold from that. Where I end up planting my flag, I don't know. But by withholding from that, I should also be very cautious because that could have been the right thing too. You see what I mean? Like, I shouldn't just withhold and reject that if I have nothing else to go by. You know what I mean? I can withhold and be like, that could be right. Yeah.
Right. So there is one other thing. You say that God has no potential, right? Only a quality.
Right.
Do you think God has the potential of being the creator of a different world, and he could have created a different world? Then, therefore, he has at least the potential of being the creator of a different world. And unless God actually accepted every possible world logically, so which I don't think you believe in, right? So then God must have at least some potential of being the right?
Well, it's so what's at stake here is the technical term potentiality. So this is most evidently seen, I think, if you look at like Aquinas uses it in the context of motion. So he talks about actual motion versus potential motion. Actual motion just is things that are moving. What is potential motion then? Potential motion, by definition, just is things at rest. Like things are not moving. So it seems like, oh, it seems like potentiality, we use it to connote like power to possibility and so on. It doesn't necessarily mean that metaphysically and technically. It just means that it's not actual. And so if you're saying that there's right, but it could be, right? There's potential there. It's possibility there. So, but you're saying that it's not happening. So, or that there's no power to do it or something like that, right? So, so if you're saying this of God, then just be aware of what it is you're saying. If you're using the word potentiality to mean what metaphysicians usually mean by that, and so like, yeah, we can talk just kind of, you know, in everyday language in terms of potentiality. Yeah, God could potentially do this or that, and I think that could be assessed in a couple of ways. Do we mean that like it's at some point, unbeknownst to us, it will happen? Yeah, we can talk about that scenario with God all the time. God could potentially invite me into heaven. Yeah, that's possible. Yeah, but that could be something that like has no bearing ontologically on God. It's just like that's describing my epistemic state. You see what I mean? Like that's like could potentially way to unpack that claim that I'm saying God could potentially invite me to heaven is that's an epistemic claim. That's not a metaphysical claim. That is, with respect to my epistemic state, I don't know whether I will be invited, and maybe I will. Like that's what that claim really is saying. The claim that I'm making has no bearing ontologically on God's potential or actual status as a being. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, kind of. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so even though we're using the everyday term potential in this context, actually is not being made as a metaphysical claim. That's my point.
Right. So here's the thing. You say that something is at rest, then it has the potential to move. But it's not the same.
Right.
It's being at rest. It's the same as having the potential to move. Because, for example, okay, what is something is at rest, but in theory, there is no space, and it cannot never possibly move, right? Can we say that this thing has the potential to move just because it's at rest? I think no, because it can.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. That's. Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, if there is no space, so it can never possibly move, then I don't see how the thing has any potential to move either, right?
Oh, are you talking about God before creation?
No, I mean,
but what are you describing?
In general, what is potential? Like you say that potential was, for example, a thing that is at rest as the same, a thing that has potential to move is the same as being as rest.
So that's the way I'm cashing it out, and I think that's what Aquinas means by that, because the argument, if it means, it has to mean at least that in order for the argument to work. So it doesn't mean only that it's at rest. It could mean also, like you were saying, it connotes, well, it's also going to have the possibility of moving further. Like, because it's, I mean, it's interesting because things that are, possibility is weird too. We're talking about some really like hard things to talk about, metaphysics of time and possibility and potentiality and so on. Possibility is weird too, because I could say, well, the Earth has the potential to shrink down to the size of an atom. Like, because it's not actually doing that, but it has the potentiality to do that. It doesn't mean that that's possible physically. It doesn't mean that that will ever happen physically. But it's just that it's not happening now. That's at least what's much of what we're saying. And we have it, I think it'd be a further commitment and claim to say that it will happen, or that it's going to happen, or it's possible to happen. Those are further claims. Certainly that it's possible to happen. That's a separate claim. In other words, that it could happen. So just because something is, let's say in the original scenario, something that's potential motion is at rest, does not necessarily mean that it could move. All we're saying right now is that it's at rest.
Right.
I mean, it could move in the very like logically possible way, bare logical possible way that it could do this thing, because it's not actually doing it. But as to whether it ever move, or that it could move, like in that physical sense, you know, that's a further claim that needs to be unpacked. Yeah.
I see. So, I mean, I guess the next question will be, okay, you see, I'm not sure I fully understood why this is important to argue that an object cannot act. But my question, is it possible that a material object has only actuality and no potential. Like you say, God needs to have this, to be like that, to explain why it can act timelessness. I mean, it's kind of complicated to follow a bit. But what if I say, okay, let's say there is a material object, a quantum vacuum that has also this is only actuality and has no potential. Why can't a material object be like this?
Well, I'm not hearing the first word. The what kind of object?
Why can't an object have only actuality and no potential? I mean, your argument is that God can act timelessly because he has no potential and only actuality, right? That's kind of what I got from it. So what my objection will be, okay, what prevents me from postulating a material object that has only actuality and no potential?
Yeah. It's not going to be the same with other objects. And I know atheists here will say, well, that's special pleading. But we can rule it out that it's not going to happen with other objects by just thinking of the ultimate ground and being of all reality. Like, what would that be? Would it's something, or just think of a necessary being. Just think of a necessary being. Would a necessary being, like back to that original argument we were thinking through, would that thing have potential in the sense of like not being actualized, not having its properties actualized? Like, sure, it has necessary properties that are necessary to it, but they're not actual. You see what I mean? Like that would be a little weird to say. So it'd be false to say of that. So, and it's interesting too, because in philosophy, these concepts aren't identical, but very often possibility and necessity correlate, or they parallel with potentiality and actuality. And also like contingency and necessity, these are parallels as well. But yeah, I think it would just go back to that. Think of a necessary being. If it has necessary properties, it would have those things, not potentially. It would actually have those things. And it would always have those things. And yeah, but thoughts on that?
But why does it have to be a conscious being? It's just my question. Which part of being a conscious being makes it that only a conscious being can be in such a way, or what part of a material object makes it like it's impossible for any material objects? You can't just say, for the material objects that we see in general, they don't have this, right? I mean, any like possible thinkable object like a quantum vacuum, a singularity, even, why can it have also the same properties, being necessary, having all of its properties be actual instead of potential? Why can't a material thing be in this way?
So I'm going to just give it my best shot. I don't know, because I'm not thought about this. You're asking some great questions, but this is how I would think. I would think, like, just take an object in the universe and let's try to attribute all actuality to it. What would that mean? I mean, let's say a star. It's doing not just the actual things that it can do now, but all actual things. Like having consciousness, having all ideas, having all capabilities, all powers, anything. Like all those things would be actual of that thing, right? Because that's what we're saying, that it would have no potentiality in it. It would only have actuality in it. Or were you saying more conservatively that, well, only with respect to the possible properties it has now, those are actual? In that case, I don't think that's a problem. Like, because at any time, a contingent being could, let's say, at some split second, actualize all its properties. That's possible. Unless those properties, like at one time I can be pale, at another time I can be tan. Those are going to be, contradictory properties. But let's say all powers, I could exercise all powers in actuality at some split second of my existence. Sure, I could do that, but that's or some object could do that.
Right. Just a thing. We say that it was for the argument to follow. It was necessary for this being to have only actuality and no potentiality. We didn't establish that it was necessary for this being to have all possible logically actualities, right? So the star doesn't need to have all possible actualities that are logically possible. The star needs to be such that the star only has actualities and no potentialities. It doesn't need to have all the possible actualities that exist.
So like just star possibilities, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, I don't see a problem with that. But notice what we're saying about God is a lot more than that. It's not just even if we were to restrict it to all God actualities or let's say all God possibilities, he is actualizing those. That seems to be fine to say too. Like, just in the same way that it's possible that a star could at some point actualize all of its possibilities at a certain point. Like, I don't see a problem with that. All of its star powers. Let's say, it seems weird to say all star powers. It seems like a Mario, Brothers thing or something. But, like I don't see a problem with that. But notice that, like, okay, well, how does that make God better? Well, because God's possibilities are God possibilities, and the star possibilities are just mere object star possibilities. Does that make sense? So I don't know. I mean, maybe somebody else hearing this and have thought about this more would answer that a little bit differently and have something where I'm missing something. But I don't know if that would be a problem to say that an object could actualize its properties all at once. But also, I don't think that that's very sustainable either. I mean, and maybe you could have that objection of God. Well, those aren't sustainable. But at that point, you're talking about something that if it's outside of time, well, why would it become exhausted? You know what I mean? Like, but a star, an object subject to the laws of the universe, would suffer entropy. So it's not sustainable in that physical sense.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the issue with the entropy, I mean, maybe someone could postulate that the quantum vacuum of this material object is not undergoing any processes which involve enthalpy, work, and energy, like in the same way that normal objects in the universe are. So maybe that's how it could bypass like the second law of the thermodynamics, because the second law of thermodynamics that's also an objection that William Lane Craig brings up against the idea of an eternal material object or material universe. The second law of thermodynamics says at some point it will cease to exist or exhaust its energy or something like that. So that's another problem. That's funny. What else? Okay. There was one last, if that's okay. There was just one last thing about this.
Of course.
What if someone, I don't like to do this because I don't think it's reasonable, but what if someone were to deny the principle of causality and say that this is a principle that is comes from our intuition or our experience? But if I were to deny it, I would say something like this: would be the best way I could do it. This comes from our intuition, but it's not a law of logic, like strictly speaking. And when it comes to cosmology and quantum stuff, there are just so many phenomena that violate our human intuitions. There's stuff like time dilatation, like this paradox of a twin, of an Einstein having a twin, and the twin travels at the speed of light and age differently. There is the quantum entanglement that is super weird. There is, for example, the fact that an object cannot have an infinite speed. When you think about it, this is weird. Why would an object, like if you can go from 100 kilometers per hour to 200 kilometers per hour, why is it theoretically impossible that it goes like more than the speed of light? I mean, there are stuff too counterintuitive. Someone could say that this causality principle is not from logic, it's just an intuition, and therefore doesn't necessarily apply to stuff like weird quantum or cosmic stuff, and therefore could be false.
Interesting. So are you saying it's not from logic, it's from empirical observation, therefore it need not apply to a God who's outside of time and space? Is that the idea?
It need not to be true. It could be false.
Oh, I see.
Maybe it's false that everything has a cause. Or they could also say, Graham Opie say something like this: every non-initial thing has a cause, right? In a way to say, okay, there's an initial material thing.
Yeah,
that's another argument.
I agree with you. It's not a physical law. It may be a physical law actually. So every effect needs a cause. Everything that begins to exist has a cause of existence. So that's, or at least the principal cause and effect is described in that way. I think this is not only, if not a physical law, it is present in reality everywhere we see it. We see it empirically, we observe it. But I also think it's a principle of rationality. And it's the way that rational human beings operate. And if they didn't, I think this is the heavy cost of denying or rejecting that. Because atheists would think that if I just got rid of the principle of causality, like maybe quantum mechanics or something like that, then I don't need to believe like causal cosmological arguments anymore, or any of this like beginning of the universe stuff. I can like start to take it with a grain of salt because the principle of causality may just not apply in that case. So it is a very tempting and seductive way of thinking, but I think there's a heavy, heavy cost with rejecting it, because at that point you're rejecting something that your own reasoning relies upon. Like all empirical observation relies on cause and effect. All discursive rational thinking and reasoning and inference relies on cause and effect. Memory relies on cause and effect. Testimony that you hear from others and learn, and by reading and everything, that relies on cause and effect. So if I reject cause and effect, then like here's the thing. I talk about this in those videos on the 5 ways. If, let's suppose, an effect can occur without its cause, if that can happen once, let's just imagine, thought experiment, suppose it could happen, effect could happen without its cause, just once. If that's possible once, it's possible all the time.
Well, okay, here's what I would say to that. Alex Malpass has a response to this. He could say that maybe the existence of the universe now prevents things from appearing without a cause. Like originally, if the universe isn't there, something can just pop out. But now that the universe is here, something cannot pop out because it will have to like displace some mass already, you know, like even air. So I could keep my cause and effect and be happy about it by saying, okay, I'm inside the universe, and the universe now is preventing things from appearing, popping on cause, right? But this principle doesn't apply if the universe like doesn't exist in a way.
Are you saying that so it can be a principle of the universe now, but prior to that it wasn't a principle of the universe?
No, prior to that there was no universe, so there wasn't
right.
a principle of whatever state, the quantum vacuum or the nothingness, the pure nothingness, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, the non-universe is.
Yeah, no, it's possible. I don't think that's where my mind was in the middle of that, where you jumped in, but I think that's possible. But I wonder, here's it's just a thought on that. I wonder if that works both ways, because if the principle of cause and effect doesn't work outside of space and time or without a universe, then you got funky things going on. Why can't a God exist? You know what I mean? Like if you're making an exception to that, or maybe God, we're told that he operates and works in mysterious ways. So maybe that's one of the mysterious ways. He doesn't need effects with causes. You know what I mean? Like, so like if you're going to deny that, you have to bite the bullet and accept these other possibilities as well. And it might cut both ways for you if you deny that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, I think that's all for today. Yeah, that was
man,
cool.
You have really challenged me, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this is a very interesting topic. I want to read like what Graham Opie has to say about it. He's got a book about God and all. I think this is very good. So I'm going to research more about this. I think it's cool.
Awesome.
I also saw you had a conversation with Grayson Hawk recently.
I did, yeah.
I know him. I know he's very good. I think.
Yeah, is that where you originally saw me? Did you? Okay, watch that. Good. Yeah. So I appreciate you coming on, and it doesn't seem like English is your first language, is it?
No.
Yeah. So man, this is from Colombia.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. That's so cool. My wife's been to Colombia several times for work. She used to work for USAID, for USAID, and she was working in that country as one of the places, and before it got shut down and everything. But yeah, she will love this. I will have to tell her, watch this guy. That's super impressive, man. To not only think about these things that you're really challenging me on, but also to do it not in your native language. That's amazing. Yeah. So I couldn't do this. Like I minored in French, and it's my second language, technically speaking. I'm really out of practice, but I could never hold a conversation about this stuff in French. So, so props to you, man. And I hope you come back. I really appreciate it.
This is a weekly thing at the same time?
It is a weekly thing. I have been gone for about 2-3 weeks because I was traveling to Europe. But now that school's back in session, I'm teaching and stuff, and this will be a continual thing. Usually at the same time. It's been the same time for all summer at Wednesday this time. Wednesdays about 4:30 to 6:30 or 7. Yeah.
Okay, that's good, man.
Yeah. Well, good to hear from you, and glad to meet you, and talk to you next time. All right. Okay. Take care. Bye. All right. So that was really, really enjoyable. So we usually end at this time, but I kind of intentionally have extended it. We need not extend it 30 minutes or so, because I could certainly start to veg out and play a Madden game or something like that. See, you guys over there in the UK and in Colombia in this case, you guys don't know about real football, American football here, but man, that's one of my weak spots is playing Madden. And it's funny. What's hilarious is it's really like a time capsule of my childhood, or like at least my like formative years and college and stuff. Because I only play like PS3, which like by now is way out of date, and it's like Madden like 2013 or something like that. So like the new stuff, and I never play online. I don't like playing with anybody. I like playing the computer. I like playing on the easiest setting, and I like blowing them out like 200 to nothing. So it's therapeutic, man, with my bourbon. And then I like watch a little bit of like, right now I'm rewatching Lost. I'm rewatching Lost. I'm on like the third or fourth season right now. So yeah. So that's what I do for therapy. I don't know about you guys. How about you guys? Yeah, real football. I love it. I love it. That's real football, man. That is real football. You're looking at it right here, Cameron. So yeah. So I'll give it to, if you've got a couple of things, I'll run through some business items here. I am considering, I'll leave this football up because that's cool. That's what I'm about to go do. Just veg out. Is Lost good? It is good. The ending sucks though, so prepare to be disappointed. Like, because by that time you've like totally invested in the characters, and everything up to that point is amazing and super mysterious and interesting and enjoyable. Plus they hit upon some philosophical themes, at least minor ways. But but the ending is very, very disappointing. So so this is not real football, but it's football, I suppose. Yeah, that is my son actually loves that more than real football, so he'll appreciate that sentiment. Yeah, so that's what I'm going to do here in a little bit. But a couple business items, guys. Considering starting a Discord, if this sounds good to you, that this is something that, by the way, that everything you get in your comments section here, the chat here, and then the comment section on videos, that would enable you to bring it into a community and just talk through things on your own time. Considering starting that. So if that seems like something you'd be interested, let me know. I can dial up the speed on that and start to do it. Why do I have this soccer ball up? This is what needs to be up. Sorry about that. I can dial up the speed on that and start it sooner. But this is a project that I'm considering starting within the next month or so. And it's just for you guys. Because I think that the conversations you guys are having here are really, really good, and they deserve to be continuing to happen. So yeah, other than that, yeah, you guys saw my post, and I appreciate all your sympathies. My great grandmother died. She's 102. I'll show you if you go to my profile here and you go to my posts, you'll see it, but this is it. This is my profile, and you go to post right here, and you look couple down here, right here. That's my great grandmother. She really was 102. She's a really tremendous lady, and she'll be sorely missed. But man, it's one of those things that, like, man, it was time for her to go, and it's a bit of relief when your relatives get that old. It's not unexpected that this happens, but and then sometimes coming across it is like, yeah, wow, so glad she's no longer suffering. So keep her in your prayers if you would, and her family as well. It's crazy because all of her kids except for one have already died, and her only living daughter is 80 years old. Imagine you being 80 years old and still having your parents around. That's wild. So yeah, that just happened like 4 days ago. She'll be severely missed, and we were going to go see her in October, which is really disappointing. My son was fairly upset, and so appreciate your prayers for her, and I appreciate doing this, guys. You guys have been so great, and I have nothing bad to say about most of you. I have nothing bad to say about you guys. You guys are really great. So hopefully we will do it in the future again. Let me get to a couple of these right here. It's called Soccer in Australia too. Your son is blessed. He is blessed because, you know, I'm his dad, but also because I'm so lucky to have him, man. He's such a smart and really sweet kid. Maybe you guys can meet him someday. And then Objective F says, this only way to play a video game, life's hard enough without getting beat up by stupid video. Yeah, man, I've broken too many controllers and thrown them at the wall. This is like if you were to talk to my dad, he always brings this up. You know how parents are, like they will never let you forget about something you did 20 years ago. My dad always likes to talk about me breaking and getting mad and throwing a controller across the room. Yeah, when I was 16, sure. That was over 20 years ago, Dad. So, but anyway, yeah, I passed those years. I'm not trying to challenge anybody for like a Madden tournament championship or anything like that. I just want to veg out. See you later, Nathan. A proponent of the MOA. What is MOA? Men of Anarchy instead of Sons of Anarchy. FIFA's better than Madden. Interestingly, because my son, this is a big reason why I didn't have the stream last week. A little confession time here, because my son, not only was he with us because he was still on summer break, but he brought his gaming PC with him because he stays a lot of the week with his mom, but he was still here. And he brought that, and he brought FIFA with him. So I got to play a couple of things. Who did I play with? I played obviously with all-star teams like Pele and Ronaldo and the real Ronaldo and who else? Maradona and stuff. So yeah, I played with those guys, and then I played a couple of times. I played with DC United and Inter Miami, of course, because MLS is way better than whatever you guys have over the UK. What is that, Premier League crap or whatever the Spanish people have. So MOA, yeah, of course, MOA, modal ontological argument. Am I a proponent of that? You know what? I haven't revisited it in a very long time. And because it's so hard to understand, it's not one of my go-tos when I'm talking to people who don't also understand it. Like, so if I'm trying to teach it, for example, let's just put it this way. If I'm teaching to intro students, this won't be the first one that we cover. If I'm thinking of like, I do think that if you're taking an intro level philosophy class with me, you should get some philosophy of religion, because those are the big questions. It's like, first of all, like there's 100 ways to build an intro to philosophy class. You should get some philosophy of religion, because those are the big questions. Does God exist? And then you should get some ethics. So I try to include that stuff in any intro class. The modal argument, though, it's not my go-to, because it's not going to be something that they're really going to buy. Like if you want to be like more effective, it's probably going to be a cosmological design argument. So in fact, I just go for the, I buy the bulk item, I buy in bulk. So I just buy the 5 arguments, man. I just like, all right, we're just going to assign one reading, 5 arguments. You get a 5-for-1 deal. And unfortunately the modal argument is one of those. So MLS is a joke. Not anymore, bro. Not anymore. Messi's there. And they just got Son for that Korean dude. And now it's interesting. Like obviously the MLS, the American system is like way, the American culture is way different, because you have to pay to play as a youth player instead of get paid to do it. Like in these farm systems. And so there's like wide chasm in between the Americans and the Europeans, for example, or other countries. But there is like more, like I've seen it in the last even 10 years, like a massive swell of interest in MLS. And maybe not for this generation, but like, and give it a generation or two, say 2 generations, and Americans could compete for the World Cup. Like it's a lot of things would have to happen, but like that's how joke it is. It's pretty bad. Yeah. So they just go there for the money. Honestly, they provide a valuable service as a pensioners package. That's exactly why they got Son, that Korean dude, on LAFC. And just to mention this, I know Primark, we have it over here. It's a UK thing, apparently. I was just there the other day, and they're carrying a lot of MLS stuff. So maybe because of UK, they're like appreciate the soccer scene more. But yeah, they Americans, you're right, trying to do what China did a few years back. Yeah. And they don't have the culture, unfortunately. Yeah. You would have to replace the top 4 sports already. You'd have to replace American football, basketball, NBA, baseball, which nobody really watches anymore. Some people do, and hockey. Like all the northern states love hockey. So you'd have to like beat out one of those, or all of those for it to be. It is just not religious. It's not the same at all. So, yeah, I think you're right about this, Cameron. By the way, field of religion can be used to teach other areas of philosophy quite well. Yeah, I agree with you. The modal argument would be one that would touch upon a lot of other areas, namely metaphysics, especially, and you can get into some epistemology there as well, but history of philosophy as well. But yeah, I agree with you. The philosophy of religion subdiscipline is good for this, but I'm not so sold. Maybe you can help me. Like, I do think I should read up on it again and like get more into it than I am now. But yeah, so back when I read it, I think I read it in undergrad, but I think it was probably for a philosophy of religion class or a medieval class. So that's how I'm aware of it. And then I revisit it for my doctoral comps, but as for that, I'm not, I've never revisited it again. I've not read deeply in it, and I'm not a number one fan of it, but I think it works. And I think that a lot of philosophers think it is a really difficult argument to reject. So even if they're atheists, it's a really difficult argument to sell where it went wrong. So that's all I got to say about that. So if anybody gets on here and wants to talk through the ontological argument, I'd probably be at a disadvantage based on their level of understanding. I can talk through the basics, of course. So, all right, guys, that is it for us today. And without another guest, we're going to end it there. I really appreciate you guys, like I said earlier, and I will see you next time. I'm going to go play some Madden. And all right, cheers. See you next week. Bye.